Okay, hey everyone, this is Quasar from Avanti High School, and I am going to attempt to talk about grades. So I say that talking about grades is like opening a can of worms. And recently I was thinking, like, what is that? Where does that phrase even come from? And is it like those cans with the springy worms that come out? Anyway, it really is. It's like everyone has a different opinion and different perspective, and it can feel honestly like a little scary to talk about grades. But I'm doing it, so wish me luck. And again, this is just my perspective, and it has been informed by my community and my attempt to grow and learn more about the history of grades, where they come from, and how they're implemented in public education. So, what is a grade? I mean, there's grade A meat, there's grade A milk. It is a system of classification in order to rank and score um, qualities that we find desirable or define as desirable. So they've played a role in education for a really long time. They're assumed to be the only way that we can communicate, a student's progress or knowledge of a certain topic or abilities. Although there are, schools or certain groups out there that are doing other things besides grades to communicate, like doing portfolios or narrative assessments, right? Like in kindergartens and things like that, in colleges. We're in Olympia, Washington. Evergreen State College is the classic example of a system that does not use grades and instead uses self-evaluations and teacher evaluations to assess progress. So there's a lot behind grades and grading, and I just want to be upfront and tell you that we have at Avanti been really informed by the work of Joe Feldman and this book, Grading for Equity, that we did a PLC with last year. You can actually get the prologue of this book and first chapter for free if you give Joe Feldman your website or your email. But I've never gotten any other emails from him, and I probably unchecked the box that allowed that. But you can get this if you're interested in learning a little bit more about where we're coming from, and not that we are implementing all of the practices that are talked about in this book, but it has helped to inform and ground our grading philosophy. So we've talked about mastery-based learning. That's in another video. So we expect students to, if they're going to earn credit in a course, and which is usually a little bit self-paced and independent here, then they need to show that they have mastery of the skills and concepts and content for that course. So how do we define mastery? Well, we're stuck in this system, right? So we have to say mastery is if you've earned a B or higher. So just for some practical sake, and so knowing that we are in this system, I created, if I can find it, a document that does sort of a cross alignment between a 100-point scale and a 4-point scale. So there, and I'll show you that in a minute when I have it pulled up. But there's some critique of a 100-point scale. So these are just 4 of the practices that Feldman kind of recommends. One is that grades should be mathematically accurate and validly describe a student's level of mastery. So they might be more proportionally structured with a 0 through 4 scale or 0 through 5 scale instead of 100-point scale. And the more points or more gradation, the more variability there is going to be from one assessor to another, one teacher to another. So there's a really cool study done in 1912 that looked at the variability between teacher scores on a 100-point scale. And then that was actually replicated in 2011. And I just want to give you the authors, by Breamy. And so Hunter Breamy got 90 high school English teachers together, and they were actually trained. I know you can't see that at all. They were trained using the 6+1 traits of writing. So English teachers might be familiar with that, and given a rubric to score English papers. So to evaluate the reliability of grading. Of the 73 participants who graded on a 100-point scale, the scores ranged from 50 to 96. So one teacher's 50 is another teacher's 96%. Letting that sink in for a second. And that's not to say that these are, incompetent teachers that don't know what they're talking about. One's really hard, one's really easy. It's just, this illustrates the variability and really the subjectivity that goes into grades and grading, even when we try to define outcomes with clear things like rubrics. Rubrics help for sure, but they're not like a fail-safe. So some of us have experimented with that 4-point scale. I'd really love to pull that up for you. But I can't. Maybe if I pause this, I'll have to edit it. Okay, I did it. I'm back. And so this is sort of the breakdown of if we take 100 points and we try to put it into a 4-point system, what then we have to translate it as. So here it is. An A is considered, well, actually, let me just back up a second and talk about a 4-point scale. So um, 4 points. So one is getting started. This is like a student is showing attempt to complete something and might need a lot of help and structuring still. And this really kind of shifts even just our mindset from a student failing at something and that being the end product, like, nope, you failed, we're moving on, to we're going to keep coming at this until you've met proficiency, or what we call mastery here at Avanti. So getting started is not failing, it's just where we all start out in our learning process. When you don't know something very well, you're going to be making mistakes and hopefully be encouraged to make those mistakes so that you do learn. 2 is making progress. So you're working on it. 3 is proficiency, and that's just with the defined standards of learning or learning targets that are desired. You have shown that you meet proficiency or mastery. See, it's still subjective, even then. And 4 is you've gone above and beyond those expectations. And so oftentimes in this model, a 4 is really is not something that is usually given. It's only if and you can't get a 4 on everything because that's unrealistic, right? So on certain things that are exceeded or are transferred to new learning, then a student might get a 4. Generally, you're going to get a 3. So the way that breaks down into a letter grade, which, we have to give a letter grade in this system. This is our option. So the letter breakdown for us, a B is what we consider proficiency, or like a 3. And so technically a straight up 3, when you divide 4 among 100 points, is actually here in the 75 to 8.7 range. And so you can actually receive a 66.8%, and that has met proficiency. So I want to also just take a second here and question and Feldman does this in his book, question the idea that a 0 to 50% is complete failure. And then all of a sudden, that halfway mark leaps you to A, B, C, and D. And that's like I think more on philosophy of grading as well. So this can be a confusing point because some students see they have a 66% and they are concerned that they're failing, but in a 4-point scale that is converted to a 100-point scale, that's actually meeting proficiency. And that does not mean that we are expecting less of those students. That's not really how that works, right? Because we actually are only grading them on a 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if a student has met mastery, they're going to receive a 3. And it's just that the math breakdown of 100 points lands it here. I maybe have rambled a little bit, and maybe one day I'll come back to this video and refine it. But one thing I also want to leave you with is an article that came out a while ago. Actually, don't know when it was published, but it's been talked about for a really long time, 2004, by Douglas Reeves, and it's called The Case Against the Zero. And it asks questions about the grading scale, what a zero means, and what a zero does to an overall grade. And so I will leave you with the 4 practices that Feldman recommends, and they're a little bit different in his book, but in this article, he talks about grades being mathematically accurate, to describe a student's level of mastery, to evaluate students based on their knowledge, not their environment, history, or behavior, which can be pretty subjective, to support hope and a growth mindset, to acknowledge that failure is a part of learning, and to not penalize that practice and to really assess like the final product of learning and our progress throughout a semester, he argues too, but that's, again, too much to go into right now. And then to lift the veil on how to succeed. So to be really clear and transparent with students and families, like, look, this is what we are asking of you to meet proficiency. And so I'm going to hold you to that standard, and I'm going to hold that standard for everyone. So I really like the framing of grading for equity. And I know this is a big conversation nationally right now, is how can we look at systems of inequity that are perpetuated unintentionally. And I think education really has some digging to do there. And this is one really big way we can make a difference and grow. Okay, they may have just generated more questions than answers, but you know where to find me, and I love to talk about this stuff. So hopefully that helped a little bit.